turn that one on.
Yeah.
Now you can hear me better, can't you? All right. Today's hearing will assess whether these government programs are meeting the needs of veterans and service members and inform any potential future subcommittee activity. In FY 2017, only 4% of the eligible veterans applied for service disability veterans insurance coverage, which indicates that these programs may not provide the protection veterans need. It's possible that many veterans prefer to use life insurance through employers or private companies. But the low participation rate may also be because VA is not providing a clear and helpful information to ensure the separating military personnel and veterans with the service-connected disabilities are aware of these benefits. On the other hand, it may be some people do not use VA programs because premiums are expensive and don't provide effective coverage. For example, the SDVI program only offers up to $10,000 of coverage, which is not enough to protect veterans and their families. Moreover, unlike other VA insurance programs, the SDVI premiums do not cover the cost of the program. Last year, taxpayers paid $67.2 million, or 47%, to make up for the funding shortfall of SDVI. If the veterans are not satisfied with SDVI or other VA insurance options, then we should find ways to provide veterans with better or more financial and physically responsible choices. In addition to looking for ways to improve VA's programs, this hearing will also look at VA's oversight of these programs, including TSIG-LEA. TSIG-LEA provides benefits for veterans who have suffered a loss due to traumatic injury, such as TBI or losing a limb. Recently, the department completed a 10-year review of TSIG-LEA program. I'm looking forward to finding out if this review will lead the department to make changes to improve the program. Finally, I'm hoping to receive an update on VA's plans to modernize the program, including SIG-LEA online enrollment system, which will allow service members to manage their coverage online. This would be a big improvement over submitting paper forms that can easily be lost. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today to discuss a very important topic for our nation's heroes. Before I recognize our distinguished ranking member, Ms. Esty, for her opening statement, I want to express my disappointment that the DOD decided not to participate in today's hearing. This is the second time that the DOD has refused to testify at one of our subcommittee hearings, and I'm hoping that this does not become a customary response from DOD. For this hearing, I invited DOD to provide views on high rate of denials for TSIG-LEA claims, and I'm frustrated because I wanted the department to explain why the armed services denied 44% of TSIG-LEA claims in FY 2017. This denial rate could be due to any number of factors, such as applicants not being eligible for the benefits. However, we don't know whether this is the reason. I was hoping the DOD would provide insight as to whether the service members may not understand the TSIG-LEA requirements, or if they may be inadvertently filing improper claims. Or are the armed services incorrectly denying benefits that service members are paying for? DOD's expertise would certainly have been helpful here today as we consider these programs and any improvements to them. I do want to thank everyone else for being here today. I'm looking forward to having this productive discussion, and now I will yield to Ranking Member Esty for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for joining us here today. And I, too, want to welcome our newest colleague from Pennsylvania, Connor Lamb. I gave him a preview at the gym this morning at 6:30, so he's totally ready to go. We all work out together, so this is a very bipartisan committee. I know that our work will be informed by the addition of another veteran to our ranks, and I want to recognize and thank him for his willingness to hit the ground running and join us here today, even though he's technically not a part of the committee yet, but we will rectify that soon. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for scheduling this important hearing today. today on the numerous life insurance programs which provide essential financial protection to our service members, veterans, and their families. It's my understanding that it has been nearly 9 years since the committee last checked on these programs. The Service Group Life Insurance SIGLI program, the Veterans Group Life Insurance VIGLI programs provide vital financial protections for service members and families. Military service to our country places a heavy burden on their shoulders, both the military and their families. And if tragedy does befall a service member or a veteran, it is very important that they should not have to worry about financial stability. And I want to welcome our witnesses and thank all of you for being here today to answer our questions. I'd like to hear about any studies or analysis that the VA has done regarding life insurance coverage and monthly premiums. I'm particularly interested in whether the coverage maximum is enough or too costly for veterans as they age, and if changes should be considered to enrollment periods. In short, these programs may well be due for an update. And if the analysis VA used to set rates and coverage are in fact out of date with demographic and other changes, it's very important that we have a new analysis using current actuarial data. And I also want to hear about the Service Group Life Insurance Traumatic Injury Program, the TSIGLI program, which can be paid if a service member is significantly injured while on active duty. Concerns were raised in a GAO report a few years ago regarding inconsistent processing of these claims. I have questions about what VA has done since that report to improve claims processing and ensure quality. It's unfortunate. I share the Chairman's frustration that the Department of Defense declined the invitation to join us here today. Their impact on this critical program would be valuable to this hearing, and I hope they will be willing to participate in the future and to respond to questions so that we can all be on the same team and serve service members and veterans the way we're supposed to. Our colleague, Mr. Kildee, has a bill, H.R. 4055, the Transparency for Wounded Warriors Act, to directly address this concern about the TSIGLI program. It would mandate that if a TSIGLI claim is denied, the Secretary must provide the veteran with a detailed legal analysis for the reason of the denial and all of the information that the Secretary relied on in making that decision. Service members eligible for this program often face years of physical and psychological therapy after losing a limb or suffering from a significant trauma. It should not take an act of Congress for them to receive accurate and understandable decisions about their claims and the specific reasons if their claims are denied. But it does appear that an act of Congress is going to be needed in this case. Finally, since it has been so long since DAMA has had a hearing on the VA insurance programs, I want to say that if any of our witnesses or anyone attending this hearing or anyone watching it, if you have questions or concerns that we do not raise in today's hearing, please contact us. All of us on this committee work hand in glove to try to improve things. So we are asking the questions that have been raised with us and that staff have been looking at, but we know there will be others out there for those of you with intimate experience with this, and we would like your help and support. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield a minute of my time to Mr. Lamb for some opening remarks, and to our witnesses if that would be, if you'd be amenable.
Mr. Lamb, you're recognized.
How about now? All right. Thank you very much to both of you for giving me the time. I will have some questions later, but for right now, I just wanted to say thank you for welcoming me. Western Pennsylvania has one of the highest concentrations of veterans of anywhere in the country. We are very proud of that fact, and we're also very determined to make sure that they get the best care possible in all ways, whether it comes to insurance or the many other services that the VA provides. And so I'll have my eye on that, and I will listen closely to what you gentlemen have to say today. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Essie. And I ask that all members waive their opening remarks as per the committee's custom. I want to welcome the witnesses here today who are joining us this afternoon and thank them for taking the time to be here. Our first witness is Mr. Robert Reynolds, who is the Deputy Undersecretary for Disability Assistance for the VA. He's accompanied by Vince E. Markey, the Director of Insurance Services for the VBA. Testifying on behalf of the American Legion is Jeff Steele, who is the Assistant Director of National Legislative Division. And also joining us is Mr. Ken Wiseman, the Associate Director of the National Legislative Services for the VFW. So welcome to all of you. And I want to remind the witnesses that your complete written statement will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Reynolds, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Esty, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Department of Veterans Affairs Insurance Program. Our mission is to provide high-value life insurance benefits and services to our nation's veterans, service members, and their families. For over 100 years, VA life insurance programs have been providing these individuals with the peace of mind and the financial security government life insurance coverage affords. Currently, VA insurance programs provide life insurance to nearly 6 million service members, veterans, and their families for over $1.2 trillion in insurance coverage. Currently, there are 10 different programs in VA's life insurance portfolio. 6 of the programs are administered directly by VA, while 4 programs are administered by Prudential Insurance Company of America, with VA providing the oversight. Overall, VA's life insurance programs remains in sound financial condition and provide coverage exclusively to disabled veterans. They are self-sustaining with the exception of the Service Disabled Veterans Insurance and the Veterans Mortgage Life Insurance programs. These programs are independently audited each year, with VA receiving favorable results for the past 25 years. In fiscal year 2017, VA returned almost $76 million in dividends to policyholders, paid over $2 billion in death claim and endowment benefits, and dispersed over $93 million in policy loans and cash surrenders. In addition, over $30 million was paid in traumatic injury protection benefits. In total, over 95% of benefits dispersed and administrative expenses spent were reimbursed by premium collections or investment earnings. Our most important performance measure is customer satisfaction. In FY 2017, over 94% of our customers were satisfied or highly satisfied with the service they received from VA. In addition to VA's customer satisfaction score are other internal measures such as 0% toll-free blockage, 16-second average speed of answer, 1.4% abandoned call rate, and benefit disbursements paid in 4.4 workdays compare favorably with the private insurance industry. In late 2014, VA initiated a comprehensive review of the SIGLI Traumatic Injury Protection Program, also known as T-SIGLI, to assess proposal for program improvements, clarify complex eligibility standards, and identify opportunities for administrative and operational enhancements. This program provides financial benefits to traumatically injured service members to assist them with expenses incurred during long periods of recovery and rehabilitation. As a result of this review, VA is enhancing its education materials and drafting a proposed rule to amend the T-SIGLI regulations, among other efforts to enhance the program. VA was pleased last year to introduce SOES, which allows active duty and eligible reserve and guard members to manage their SIGLI coverage and family SIGLI coverage online. SOES replaces the prior paper-based process and brings the SIGLI program in line with current industry best practices. VA collaborated with the Department of Defense, the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, the Defense Manpower Data Center, and the Uniformed Services to develop SOES. As of April 16 of this year, more than 927,000 service members have confirmed and certified coverage in SOES. VA remains committed to providing our nation's hero with life insurance options that are equal or superior to those offered by private insurance companies. We continually strive to meet our customers' needs and provide services at a comparable cost to industry standards. To this end, in FY 2017, we conducted over 200 interviews with veterans and veteran service officers across the country to gain a deeper understanding of veterans' life insurance needs. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I'd be pleased to answer any questions you or other members of the subcommittee may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Steele, you're recognized for 5 minutes to give your statement.
Chairman Boss, Ranking Member Esty, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, on behalf of National Commander Denise Rohan and the 202 million members of the American Legion, we thank you for the opportunity to testify regarding VA's life insurance programs today. The American Legion has directly assisted veterans and their dependents for over 40 years by providing a chief of insurance activities at the VA Insurance Center in Philadelphia. The American Legion's work in assisting these individuals allows us to bring over 4 decades of experience before this subcommittee. A congressional oversight hearing on VA's life insurance programs was last conducted in 2003 to our best reckoning. We are thankful for Chairman Boss and Ranking Member Esty's leadership in addressing this matter. The VA currently administers 6 life insurance programs, 4 closed and 4 open to new issues. In addition to the life insurance programs directly operated by the VA, the department also has general supervisory authority over 4 other major government life insurance programs. VA has entered into a group policy with Prudential Insurance Company of America to administer these programs. You have my written testimony, so in the time I have, I'll focus on T-Sigley and SDVI. But as a matter of historic note, 2019 marks the 100th anniversary of the United States Government Life Insurance Program, or USIGLY, just as it does for the American Legion. The program was established to meet the needs of World War I veterans and represented the first foray into service member and veteran life insurance by the federal government. More than 4 million life insurance policies were issued during World War I, and as of 2017, there were just 124 active policies remaining, with the policyholders' average age of 95. What a history. The government became a self-insurer because private insurance companies were unwilling to assume the unpredictable risks associated with war. Government became the largest life insurer in the United States at the time with the coverage provided by this program. Regarding T-Sigley, the program provides automatic traumatic injury coverage to all service members covered under Sigley. T-Sigley claims are adjudicated and decided by the military service departments involved and not by VA. A 2009 GAO report found that fewer than 63% of claims filed for TBI were approved. GAO further found that the program lacked consistency across branches and lacked assurances that decisions about benefit payments were accurate. According to the GAO report, VA's contractor created a claims analyst position to work with VA and the branches of service to review all incoming claims, to validate decisions, and develop reports to assess consistency of claims decisions across the branches of service. The American Legion, in preparing for this testimony, found that this claims analyst position is no longer active. This raises the question of how VA is currently assessing consistency and quality of claims decisions. In addition, the American Legion, in speaking with attorneys representing T-Sigley claimants, has learned that the military services are not consistently applying the proper burden of proof. Regarding the SDVI program, these policies are issued for a maximum face value of $10,000, and this amount has not been increased in almost 6 decades. By comparison, $10,000 in 1951 would be worth around $95,000 today, adjusting for inflation. For many severely disabled veterans, SDVI is the only life insurance coverage available to them. Though other government-sponsored programs may have existed when the service member was released from service, many veterans in their younger years may not have had the foresight to take action on long-term financial matters such as life insurance. Others simply cannot afford to meet the cost of a policy at the time of separation. Legislation sponsored by Representative Stephen Pierce has been introduced in this Congress H.R. 4146, the Disabled Veterans Life Insurance Act of 2017, that would remedy many of these issues that currently exist with the SDVI program, such as updating the antiquated mortality and annuity tables, increasing the maximum benefit cap, and extending the enrollment eligibility to 10 years. In conclusion, VA's life insurance programs provide valuable benefits and important financial security to service members, veterans, and their families, given the extraordinary risks involved in military service. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony. I'm prepared to take any questions you or the subcommittee may have, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Wiseman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Esty, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the veterans of foreign wars of the United States and its auxiliary, thank you for the opportunity to provide our remarks on the Department of Veterans Affairs insurance programs. VA is responsible for several insurance programs that provide a sense of financial security at a time when a family is suffering from their loss of loved ones. The VFW has heard from veterans the reasons they do not choose VA programs. So while we see the value of these programs, we seek improvement and oversight so their integrity and value are protected. In general, process reform is something all insurance programs could use. The VFW has learned of times when an estate or trust could not receive the payout even if the deceased had established an estate or trust. Programs that pay out at the time of death for the service member or the veteran should be able to pay out to an estate or trust. Out-of-date contact information for a beneficiary makes it hard to contact them and could delay payments. But this could be corrected with better outreach. VA could increase exposure to insurance programs through the transition counseling received by service members leaving the military. This would be a great way to ensure that contact information is as current as possible and could also lead to more veterans using these programs. VGLI provides great coverage for a veteran needing larger amounts of insurance protection. However, the rates and cost of premiums must be something that compete in the private market. A $200,000 policy would see premium increases of 1,875% over the age range of 29 to 69. This could lead to a veteran not being able to afford coverage needed to ensure financial security in their retirement years and difficulty in securing insurance from other sources due to service-connected injuries. Also of concern is the amount of time a veteran has to join the program. Veterans may not consider the implications of losing SGI when leaving service, and their focus on transition may not include getting coverage. Additionally, the VFW has learned that a diagnosis of PTSD makes it difficult for veterans to get coverage from other life insurance companies, and they may face higher premiums for smaller policies if they can get coverage. Knowing that VGLI does not consider service-connected disabilities, the VFW supports an open-ended enrollment period to allow veterans to obtain coverage. SGLI provides insurance to members of the military and pays out to surviving spouses and families. Oversight of this program is a key concern for the VFW. In 2015, the VFW was party to a successful motion against Prudential Insurance requiring the documents related to a class action lawsuit be unsealed. The lawsuit concerned the method that Prudential used to make lump sum payments, which was to place them in an investment account known as an alliance account. Those receiving payments through the alliance account alleged a breach of contract in violation of federal law. While the lawsuit has been settled, the VFW is concerned that the alliance account option continues to be offered and promoted on materials that beneficiaries receive. The law states a lump sum payment or 36 equal payments are the only allowed options, not an option that results in an investment. The interest earned on this investment benefits Prudential, and the VFW objects to companies making money off of families who have lost a loved one that made the supreme sacrifice for our country. TSGLI provides automatic traumatic injury coverage to all service members covered under SGLI. The VFW urges a review of the TSGLI for loss of fingers. Currently, the loss of 4 fingers or the thumb is the requirement for payment. The loss of digits not only has an impact on dexterity and complexity of tasks the person is able to perform, but also has psychological and cosmetic impact. The VFW recommends payment be allowed under TSGLI on a per-digit basis, a higher amount for the loss of 4 digits total not including the thumb, and a payout for the loss of the thumb. SDVI allows veterans to receive a disability rating, even of 0%, to secure life insurance. Each time new conditions are added to the rating, they have a new opportunity to join. However, the increase of a rating for an existing diagnosis does not trigger the same opportunity. The VFW calls on Congress to allow those veterans who receive an increased rating for any reason to join SDVI. Additional concerns include the amount of money provided by SDVI, as $10,000 is not an amount that reflects the current cost of burial. Also, the current period in which a veteran can join this program should be lengthened to allow veterans to make decisions about their needs based on their life changes. Because of these additional concerns with this program, the VFW supports passage of H.R. 4146, the Disabled Veterans Life Insurance Act of 2017, which would correct issues with SDVI. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my testimony. I am prepared to take any questions that you or the subcommittee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wiseman. And I will begin the questioning. And once again, thank you all for being here. Mr. Reynolds, can you explain why you believe that VIGLI and SDVI programs have such low participation rate?
I'll ask our insurance director, Vince Markey, to respond on that. But from my point of view as well is when I separated from service, that was not in my mind at that point as a hard-charging warrior to say, do I need life insurance, right? And so I think that's part of it, and how can we do further outreach. But Vince, if you have anything further to add.
Sure. As far as the, I think for the SDVI program, the application rate is around 4% of those eligible for SDVI, and I think some of the reasons are some of the things that we talked about today, $10,000 worth of insurance. The premiums are based on an old 1941 CSO table, so they're typically 3 times more expensive than our VEGLI program. And also there is a 2-year limit, and many 2-year limit to apply from the time you get your service-connected disability, a new service-connected disability. So there is time limits. But I would say for SDVI, I don't know exactly why. We haven't done a needs assessment, but I would think that there would be the obvious reasons, both coverage and cost. Okay. For VGLI's take rate in 2017 was 16.5%, which has improved dramatically in the last couple of years. It was hovering around 8% in around 2012 and 13. We have done some marketing improvements for that program, and the rate has increased. VGLI, as this also was said, is not the insurance for everyone coming out. You don't need insurance when you're younger. You may be getting employer insurance. We are happy with the 16.5%. We hope to get a little bit better.
Right. Mr. Wiseman, you actually brought up in your testimony some suggestions. Can you kind of expand on those suggestions?
For SDVI?
Well, it's for both VIGLI and SDVI.
Yes, sir. So for SDVI, one of the things that the legislation that we endorsed, H.R. 4146, does, it expands out from 2 years to 10 years, that ability for the veteran to enroll. That would allow for more education, more outreach, changes in life. People graduate college, start families, et cetera. It also increases the amount that the policy would pay out, and it allows for the adjustment of that so that the policy stays current with times. As you heard my counterpart say, it'd be worth roughly $95,000 today when you adjust for inflation. I'm a customer of both VGLI and SDVI, and so those abilities for the veteran to be able to choose their needs, creating options, not barriers, that's our overall approach to this.
Mr. Steele, would you expand on any of those? Yeah, and I have to almost, Mr. Reynolds, I agree with you. It's not on your mind when you leave the service. You got a whole lot of things on your mind, but that's not, unless you're a little older. Unless you're a little older when you leave, then you might be thinking that. So when we're at the rate of, and this will just go to the panel, we're at the rate of $10,000 on the one, and that you say that was equivalent of $90,000, right, at that time. And this is the first hearing we've had since 2003. I think this is something that maybe as we start listening to everyone as we move through this process, that there's a reason we needed to have this hearing. Do you want, Mr. Reynolds, do you want to respond? I've got one more minute here to any of the suggestions on where do you think the department sees this going, and do you agree with what the VSOs are expressing, or?
So we would definitely need to take back and look further at what they're proposing, but we are definitely looking at this as well within VA and are trying to put a plan together. Our plan is to have the plan presented to you all first early part of June as previously committed.
Okay. All right, wonderful. That's the questions I had. I will turn over to the ranking member.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for illuminating this subject for us. A quick, discrete question, and then I really want to get into the meat of this. We've been looking at a variety of different VA outreach to see if they're 508 compliant for disabled. Is the SOS system 508 compliant, do you know? Because we're talking about folks who are disabled here, right? So, anyone know?
I'm not sure. I can't answer whether it's 508 compliant. However, just to clarify, for the single online enrollment system is for active duty policyholders, so it's probably not, the need for 508 compliant isn't there.
But I think as we're looking at online systems, it's really important that we remember that they be 508 compliant. It's not just the law, but it's also the right thing to do. We want to facilitate, because that could be family members and others who are accessing the system and who need to have access. I want to return to this issue that you've all flagged, which is the question about at separation. People have a lot of other things on their mind. We spent a lot of time on this committee looking at that transition, and we don't get a warm handoff. I hear it all the time in my district. So I'm looking at both for Sigley and Vigley, that why don't we just flip the default that default you're enrolled? Why don't we make the default for the first year you are enrolled at whatever level you used to be at, and that gives the veteran time to figure out where they're living, what they want to do they have a job, does this make sense? And you could opt out, but the default would be enrollment. I look at particularly for Vigley, if you don't enroll promptly, you have to go back through a medical exam. Mm-hmm. And precisely the people who are most likely to fail that medical exam are the people who are not going to be in a good position to be thinking clearly that actually they need to fill out this paperwork and opt in. So I'd like you for both those programs to help us with your thought, like what would happen if we just flipped the presumption? Because we've seen what happened. You're talking about a 16% enrollment rate. If you look at on the retirement program side, companies that have gone to default enroll see enrollment in the 80% enroll if it's a default enroll system. And we know that's better for veterans. They've got young children. They're making decisions. This is much smarter for their long-term future, and we should frankly care about that. We should be making it easy for them to make smarter decisions, or at least give them the first year when they may be busy with a lot of other things, just want to get home. So love your thoughts on that.
Yes. One of the issues with the Veterans Group Life Insurance Program is that it must be self-supporting. It does not get taxpayer dollars or budget authority. For self-enrollment, that would increase both the administrative cost of the program, because we would have to mail invites to all separating service members, and we would also have probably a lot of adjudicative problems, because if an individual, after the first year, if you say it's for free, first of all, that would increase our death claims, which is a cost. And then we would have to then start collecting premiums after that, and there would be a gap between the time the people didn't pay their premiums and thought they were covered. But I think the main reason that we've looked into this, and I think the main reason is the cost, and the only way to provide those costs would be to increase premiums under this current construct, to increase premiums on our other policyholders.
So there'd be no way to do a charge automatically? I'm just trying to figure out, because I understand your point about providing it for free. Is there a way to do that at separation that would start that process? And I frankly just don't know, but I think it's worth looking at having that default. And so maybe we can try to see whether there's anything. So, I mean, I know they get 120 days free, so the question is, again, what is going to do right by our veterans and get them to that point that they actually are having the benefit of what these programs are. Maybe from the VSOs, if you've got thoughts on this.
Madam Ranking Member, I'm accredited to help veterans do their claims, and I always do a follow-up appointment when the veteran gets their rating decision back. You get your rating decision, and in the back there is a mention of insurance policies, but then VA sends a separate letter to talk about insurance. When I get this veteran in front of me to discuss this, I have their undivided attention. If we can put a more robust mention or even merge the two letters together, that's an option to catch the attention right there when you have the veteran saying, this is your new rating, and by the way, you're eligible for this as well.
Other thoughts, maybe from the VA, is that something that you'd be amenable to doing, to have an automatic, to have those paired letters? Is that a possibility?
So, I mean, that's something we definitely would need to look at. I'm supportive of whatever we can do to provide the best service to our service members, veterans, family members, and survivors. I mean, one of the things that we've just recently done was undertake the complete redesign of our transition assistance program earlier this month, and we've actually highlighted, I think that's one of the first things now is the V-SIGLE, so that they're aware about that benefit before they separate service.
Thank you, and I'm sorry, whenever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Esty. Mr. Kaufman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As to the Veterans Group Life Insurance, there was several years ago in Denver, Colorado, there was an issue concerning a Veterans Group Life Insurance policy, and an investigative reporter with Fox Channel 31 did a great job in looking into this. And the veteran's son, an elderly veteran who had passed away, his son reported this. And what a VA employee did, who was in some manner taking care of this elderly veteran, was to fill out a change in beneficiary and put his name on it, that they had a handwriting expert look at it, engaged by this investigative reporter, and it was not the handwriting, the signature of the elderly gentleman that passed away affirmed that. No action was taken against the VA employee, who said he had a relationship prior to a prior relationship with the elderly gentleman, which turned out not to be true. Would you be opposed to a provision whereby VA employees, unless they're related to the veteran, cannot be listed as beneficiaries, just so that we don't have fraud like this occurring in the future? Mr. Reynolds?
I don't know if I'd be, I mean, it's something I would definitely need to take back and look at to see the ramifications. I mean, could it be a caregiver that's been assigned, you know, from?
I believe it was a caregiver.
Right. I mean, you know, I've got battle buddies that maybe have put me, even though I'm a VA employee, as their caregiver or something, and, you know, you don't want to harm that type of relationship if, you know, but if there was a fraudulent activity, absolutely we need to take accountability on that. But it's something we should definitely.
You know, I'd like for you to come back formally with a position on that, because I fundamentally don't think that somebody in a position of trust like that, in somebody who is vulnerable and elderly, who happens to have a local, a son residing locally, who didn't receive, who was the beneficiary, and this individual changed, you know, they're very questionable, and so I think that we just ought to have some ethics here.
Agree.
And those ethics ought to be that caregivers are not the beneficiaries unless they were a beneficiary prior to being the caregiver. And so let's have a policy on that, and let's put it in law.
Okay. I'm happy to take that back and bring it back for the record.
I yield back.
Mr. Lamb, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Either Mr. Reynolds or Mr. Markey, can you tell me how many veterans are currently enrolled in the U.S. Government Life Insurance Program, the National Service Life Insurance Program, the Veterans Special Life Insurance Program, and the Veterans Reopened Insurance Programs? I can repeat those if it was too many at once.
I'm familiar with the programs. We have about 577,000 I would have to go back and get you the exact number. I don't have that number in front of me, but we do keep very well track of how many veterans we have in each one of those programs.
Okay. Do you send annual statements of coverage to the aging veterans to ensure that they and their families know that they have coverage?
We send annual statements to all our policyholders.
To the policyholders.
Both in both the VEGLI program and our VA life insurance programs.
Okay. I think we all agree service members and veterans deserve timely and accurate decisions from the VA. So in the case of SGLI and TSGLI, can you detail how you're working with DOD to improve and streamline the process for these claims?
Well, I think SGLI works very efficiently, and I don't think that's an issue. We have looked into the TSGLI program. We work very closely with the branches of service and Department of Defense on that program. For instance, we have quarterly meetings with the branches of service, TSGLI adjudicators. We have meetings with the medical experts who approve those claims. The branches of service were fully involved in our Year 10 review of the TSGLI program. So we do work in concert with the Department of Defense on the program.
Okay. Mr. Wiseman, for injured service members coming out of the military into civilian life, can you just talk about the importance of the TSGLI program? Specifically, do you think the current payouts are reflective of traumatic injuries, their impact on future employment and professional life after the service?
Thank you, Congressman. The TSGLI program, as I mentioned in the testimony, should look at the loss of individual digits. And a great example is if you're a military police officer and you want to take that skill with you into the civilian world and become a police officer, let's say you have an injury that leads to the loss of your shooting hand's index finger. You're not going to be able to qualify with a weapon. And so that will impact your ability to translate those skills. If you worked in personnel and you go to get a human resource job, it may involve a lot of typing. You use all 10 fingers to type. And so the loss of 4 fingers is significant, but the loss of 1 digit could also have an impact on your ability to transition to a new job.
Absolutely. And Mr. Steele, can you talk a little bit about any feedback you've gotten from your membership regarding the affordability of the VGLI policies, especially for aging veterans as they get older?
Well, as you know, the premiums do increase dramatically over time. So what I've been informed by my colleagues at the Insurance Center is that often veterans will decrease their amount of coverage so that they can lower their premiums. Now, part of this is a function of life insurance. When you're younger and you still have a family, a mortgage, debts, you may want a $400,000, $700,000 worth of life insurance because you've got a whole life ahead of yourself. If you die sooner rather than later, you've got to cover that. The older you get, the more of the debts that you've paid off, the less life insurance you may necessarily need. So it may make sense for veterans to decrease their amount of coverage and decrease their premiums, and it may be competitive with the private insurance, but I think some of it's just a function of the fact that the program has to be self-sustaining financially, so that's how the math works.
Do you believe the current rate based on age is a fair assessment, and are there any suggestions you have for modernizing this aspect of the program?
Well, Congress would have to consider changing the construct because if you're going to decrease the premiums, the money's got to come from somewhere. And if it's going to be self-sustaining, then it's coming from other veterans. If you're going to decrease the premiums, it would have to come from Congress.
Thank you.
If I understand correctly.
Yes, no, absolutely. Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield the remainder. 10 seconds.
Thank you. Mr. Hunter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Esty, for letting me be here. I'm not on this committee, but I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and I chair the Coast Guard Subcommittee on Transportation. So I'm a member of all of your groups. This is very nice. I've never had anybody sitting down there where I'm a veteran, so I burden the VA, and I'm in the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars. So here's my question, I guess, to start. You sign up for SGLI when you're on active duty, but it's a VA benefit. Explain that to me, because the reason I'm here right now is trying to do something on the Armed Services Committee having to do with SGLI, and this committee has purview over that. So explain that, please, really quick.
I think this is easy. I think that all VA life insurance programs, even SGLI, are covered under Title 38. So this jurisdiction, this committee has jurisdiction over them, even though it's covering active duty service members.
Okay, so here's my specific question, and maybe that's a problem because SGLI is for active duty service members, right? Not for veterans in any way, unless you transfer it to VGLI or whatever the different terms are, which I don't know because I'm not on this committee. So if you go to Title 38, Part 2, Chapter 19, Subchapter 3 of the code that talks about SGLI, which I have right in front of me, Paragraph 1 says this: if a member who is married and who is eligible for insurance under this section makes an election under the subsection blah, 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 not to be insured, the secretary concerned shall notify the member's spouse in writing of that election. So, Marine Corps Lieutenant Duncan Hunter, I opt out of SGLI. I don't want it. I'm not going to die. I'm fine. By law, the secretary has to notify my spouse. Okay? Let me read down further. That's what you would think by reading that. Here's the problem. Number 4, paragraph 4, that was 1. It says the same thing in 2 and 3. If you change it, if you lower SGLI, your spouse gets notified as well. The last section, section 4. A notification required by this subsection is satisfied by a good faith effort to provide the required information to the spouse at the last address, blah, blah, blah. But failure to provide a notification at all required under this subsection in a timely manner does not affect the validity of anything. Okay, so that's in there too. So it says you must do it, the secretary must notify the spouse, and then it says at the very bottom, just kidding. You don't have to do any of that stuff we just said. That's a problem. A lady named Teresa Jones, her husband died in San Diego. She's in my district. She's not actually, but she's there. No one else would help her on this because Prudential said no. And the VA said no. And the Navy said no. Until we shamed them and embarrassed them into doing the right thing. And it was pure politics. Because according to law, they didn't have to pay her anything. And he died while landing his helicopter on a moving amphib, right? So he died in the act of training on active duty. They told her she's not going to get paid anything because he opted out of his SGLI and never told her. That's the crux of this. He opted out of his SGLI. She never knew. They said, no, you get $0 to her. Okay, her name's Teresa Jones in San Diego. She got paid, but all because we put it in the media and applied massive pressure to Prudential, frankly. So what say you? What is the fix of this, and why this has got to be a VA fix? That part of the law needs to change, right? The spouse should be notified, period. Can you give me your thoughts?
Well, I'm not familiar with that particular circumstance, but I was just made aware of a new section in the FY19 NDAA that if a service member had elected to not get SIGLI or had taken a reduced amount, that if they were mobilized to a combat zone, they would automatically get re-entered into SIGLI at the maximum value and then returned after combat.
I think that's
a good idea.
But if you die in training,
so that's a very...
Okay, so that doesn't help that, right? And I found out, so this, by the way, this fix passed voice vote through the defense bill last year, and the Senate pulled it out and referred it to the Judiciary Committee in the Senate for whatever reason. VA, you got anything here? It's your fund, which I didn't, I mean, for active duty guys for some reason, but it's yours, so go ahead.
Correct, and insurance, SIGLI is just one of the benefit that our men and women in uniform.
So let's talk just about SGLI for this moment, for this one case.
Okay.
What do you think about having to notify the spouse if a service member opts out of their life insurance?
So from my understanding, and Vince, I'll ask you if you know any other details, but I think...
Just answer me that. I've only got 4 seconds. Do you think that the spouse of an active duty service member should be notified if they opt out of their life insurance?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and, though I don't have more questions, I know the ranking member has. We're going to go one more round if need be. So, yeah. So you're now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to actually follow up with my colleague from Transportation and Infrastructure, Mr. Hunter, about couldn't we change that? Maybe that's going to take an act of Congress to do that, to say unless you get actual notice. Like the spouse has actually received a notice, it is in place until there's actual notice achieved. And that those policies have to be honored unless you can demonstrate that notice was actually received by the spouse. And I think that might be a way to change it. And then it will be an incentive of everybody concerned to make sure that notice is actually received. And I think it's very important to say, like, we're just not actually going to let you opt out when you're in active duty, because that's irresponsible and unfair to your family, who will bear the burden if that happens. So I think we should continue to work on this and find some legislative fixes. Clearly, that's an unacceptable situation, and we should fix that. So if you've got thoughts on that. The two issues I had on my plate, one was this basic issue about plain language, although it is related to my colleague Mr. Hunter's issue. People should not have to go to law school or be insurance executives to understand these notices, right? We're working on this through the TAPS program. So when I know we're looking to have another convening of this committee, of the subcommittee later this year in June, could you please bring copies of the notices on these, what you actually send out? And maybe, Mr. Wiseman, you talked about, as a VSO, you're looking at the two different, the rating
Correct.
level as well as the premium notice. Let's bring them together and actually look at them, if you can send them ahead of time. And maybe if anyone would be so good as to think about what a combined notice might look like, or how do you flag that in the letter, or do you set it out in a box in red or something that it really grabs people's attention. We are committed, everyone's committed to the goal, but let's make it effective. Just as the notice is not effective in that case. It really needs to be effective. The other issue I wanted to raise was one we've heard about, and that has to do with the T-Sigley program when there are these large payouts, particularly if you say the full $100,000 payout. Frankly, there's some not good decision-making or opportunities to be preyed upon at that time. Has there been any thought about any sort of financial counseling or advice for what often may be very young men or women who have gone through this just horrific, transformative, catastrophic injury? And $100,000 may sound like a lot of money, and they just may need some assistance. Or have you thought about that? Because we've heard some really heart-wrenching stories. And then, of course, remorse within a matter of months of, like, wow, that car that I can't drive looks awfully pretty sitting there in the driveway, but I'm never going to be able to drive it, and that was maybe not a good idea. So if folks have thoughts on that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes it's the buyer's remorse after they spend the money on something. The military does provide financial counseling to service members, generally speaking, and so that is something that is currently done. And when you get a payout under VA programs for family members and whatnot, there is an option that does exist for them to be able to log in and get some advice. In fact, part of their login name is their claim number. And so the VFW would be more than happy to support any type of enhanced financial counseling that we can provide, because you're absolutely right. That's a monumental moment when you're sitting there going, not only is your loved one passed, now you're managing the family, and by the way, here's $400,000. And so that is significant. We'd be happy to work with your office on better options.
Excuse me. As part of the information, we do provide free financial counseling to beneficiaries of all the Segley programs, Segley, T-Segley payments, VEGLI payments. You can get free counseling either through a limited counseling from telephone interviews, or you can go and opt for a full free counseling service.
But tying both of these issues together, do people receive notice, say, at a payout of $50,000 or higher? Is there automatic notice with, here is the information, you are entitled to this, we urge you to avail yourself of this or other financial counseling? It would seem that it may be available, but it's quite different at the time of payout or notice you're going to be getting one to say, reminder, here is what you're entitled to. We would urge you to consider accessing this. So again, I'd ask you to, for our next hearing, if you would consider what that might look like, because again, having the program available, but at a time when it's meaningful to people, and that's a lot of the challenges we have. They're wonderful programs and wonderful VSOs, but people don't know about it at the time they need to. Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to do another round.
Mr. Lamb, do you have other questions? All right, then. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here again today. I said earlier that the complete written statements of today's witnesses First off, one thing I forgot. Do you need a closing statement? Okay. As I said earlier, then, the complete written statements of today's witnesses will be entered into the hearing record. I also ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Hearing no objections, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned.